You didn't just survive, you transformed. While others were distracted, you were being shaped in silence. Every disappointment, every delay, every moment that felt like rejection, it was all part of a deeper assignment. You weren't being punished, you were being prepared. And now, something has shifted. Chosen one, you've completed a major soul lesson, the kind that couldn't be rushed. The kind that demanded patience when you wanted speed, faith when you felt uncertain, and strength when you were tired of holding on. You learned to let go without losing yourself. You learned to walk away without bitterness. You learned to grow without needing validation. That's not ordinary, that's mastery. And here's the truth most people won't understand. Once the lesson is complete, the reward doesn't just show up, it unfolds. Quietly, powerfully, irreversibly. You may not see it all yet, but the energy around your life has changed. Doors that once felt locked are beginning to open. Connections are aligning. Opportunities are finding you. Why? Because you're no longer the same person who started this journey. The next level isn't just about success, it's about alignment. Wealth that doesn't drain you. Love that doesn't confuse you. Peace that doesn't leave you. This is your elevation season, and this time, you're not chasing anything. Everything is finally coming to you. You were being prepared, not delayed. It didn't feel like preparation. It felt like frustration. Doors closed without explanation. Opportunities slipped through your fingers just when you thought you were close. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you missed your moment. But what if nothing was ever truly missing, only being redirected? What you called a delay was actually precision. There are seasons in life where movement would have been a mistake, where receiving too early would have broken you instead of blessing you. So instead, life slowed you down, not to punish you, but to protect the version of you that wasn't ready yet. Because elevation without foundation is a setup for collapse. You were being strengthened in ways no one could see. Your patience was stretched, your faith was refined, your discernment sharpened. You learned how to sit in uncertainty without losing yourself. That's not weakness, that's rare power. Think about it. If everything had worked out when you wanted it to, would you have become who you are now? Would you have developed the resilience, the clarity, the quiet confidence you carry today? Probably not. The truth is, timing isn't just about when things happen, it's about who you are when they do. And now, you're different. You're no longer desperate, no longer rushing, no longer willing to accept less just because it arrived quickly. You've grown into someone who understands alignment over urgency, and that's exactly why things are beginning to shift. Because now, you're not just ready to receive, you're ready to sustain. So no, you were never delayed. You were being prepared for a life that actually matches your worth. You learned to choose yourself. There was a time when you abandoned yourself just to keep others comfortable. You overgave, over-explained, overextended, hoping that love would be returned in the same measure. You tolerated things that drained you, stayed longer than you should have, and poured into people who never poured back. Not because you were weak, but because you hadn't fully realized your worth yet. But something in you shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the disappointment that finally became too loud to ignore. Or maybe it was the quiet realization that no one was coming to save you. You had to choose yourself. And when you did, everything changed. Choosing yourself wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't come with applause. It came with boundaries, with saying no without guilt, with walking away without needing closure, with finally understanding that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. You stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that couldn't hold you. You stopped explaining your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped begging for the bare minimum and started requiring alignment. That decision cost you some people, but it also gave you yourself back. And that's the trade most people are too afraid to make. Because choosing yourself means facing loneliness before alignment. It means standing alone before you stand fulfilled. But what you've discovered is this: being alone in your truth feels better than being surrounded in your betrayal. Now, your energy is different. You don't chase, you attract. You don't convince, you observe. You don't settle, you select. Because once you choose yourself, You stop accepting anything that doesn't choose you back, and that is where your power truly begins. You released what no longer served you. Letting go wasn't easy, especially when it involved things you once prayed for. You held on because of history, because of hope, because of who people used to be. You told yourself to be patient, to give it time, to keep trying, but deep down, you felt it that quiet, knowing that something had already expired, and still, you stayed. Until one day, staying started to hurt more than leaving. That was your turning point. You realized that not everything you lose is a loss. Some things are released because they've already fulfilled their purpose in your life. And holding on past that point doesn't preserve the connection, it drains you. It keeps you stuck in cycles that no longer match who you're becoming. So you made a difficult, powerful choice. You let go, not with anger, not with revenge, but with awareness. You stopped forcing conversations that felt one-sided. You stopped investing in people who only showed up when it was convenient. You stopped revisiting places, habits, and versions of yourself that kept pulling you backward. And yes, it hurt. Because release often feels like grief. You're not just letting go of what is, you're letting go of what you thought it could be. The future you imagined, the comfort you got used to, the identity you built around it. But here's what you gained in return. Space. Space to breathe, space to grow. Space to receive what actually aligns with you now. Because your life can't be filled with new blessings if your hands are still tightly gripping what's expired. And now, you understand something most people resist. Letting go isn't losing. It's making room for something better to finally find you. You mastered emotional discipline. There was a time when everything triggered you. A tone, a delay, a shift in someone's energy, and suddenly your peace was gone. You reacted quickly, felt deeply, and carried emotions longer than you should have. Not because you were weak, but because you hadn't yet learned how to protect your inner world. But life taught you, not gently, but effectively. Through misunderstandings, disappointments, and moments where you realized that reacting only made things worse, you began to see a pattern. Every time you gave in to impulse, you lost a piece of your clarity. Every time you allowed emotions to lead without control, you ended up drained, confused, or misrepresented. So you changed. You stopped responding instantly. You gave yourself space to process. You learned the power of silence, not as avoidance, but as control. You realized that not everything deserves your reaction, and not everyone deserves access to your emotions. That's when your strength became quiet, but undeniable. Emotional discipline isn't about suppressing how you feel, it's about choosing how you express it. It's the ability to stay grounded when everything around you feels chaotic. It's knowing when to speak, when to walk away, and when to simply observe. And now, you move differently. You don't argue to be understood, you communicate with intention. You don't chase closure, you create it within yourself. You don't let temporary emotions lead to permanent decisions. People may mistake your calmness for distance, but what they don't realize is this: you've mastered yourself. Because real power isn't loud, reactive, or impulsive. Real power is being able to feel everything and still choose peace. You grew in silence. There was no announcement, no validation, no audience watching your transformation unfold. While others were busy proving, posting, and performing, you were evolving in the quiet. And at times, it felt invisible, like all your effort, all your inner work, was going unnoticed. But that silence was sacred, because not everything that grows is meant to be seen in the early stages. Seeds don't break through the surface the same day they're planted. There's a hidden process, a deep, unseen development that must happen first. And that's exactly where you were. In the dark, building roots. You were unlearning patterns, healing wounds no one knew about, rewiring your mindset, facing parts of yourself that most people run from. There were no applause for those nights you chose growth over comfort. No recognition for the discipline it took to keep going when nothing around you seemed to change. But something was changing you. You stopped needing external validation. You stopped announcing your next move. You became more private, more intentional, more focused. You understood that energy speaks louder when it's not constantly explained. And now, the results are beginning to show. Not through noise, but through presence, through how you carry yourself, through the peace you protect, through the standards you no longer lower. People may not know your story, but they can feel your transformation. That's the power of silent growth. Because when you evolve without seeking attention, your elevation becomes undeniable. It doesn't need to be proven, it's felt. And the best part? The same people who overlooked your quiet seasons will be the ones trying to understand your loud results. You broke old cycles. Some patterns don't just live in habits. They live in bloodlines, environments, and deeply rooted beliefs. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to change your life. You had to confront what had been repeating itself for years. The same kinds of relationships, the same disappointments, the same emotional loops that kept pulling you back to a place you had already outgrown. And the hardest part? Realizing that it wasn't just them, it was what you had learned to accept. That awareness changed everything, because once you see a cycle clearly, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice the red flags earlier. The patterns become obvious. The excuses no longer convince you. And suddenly, what once felt normal starts to feel heavy, even unbearable. That's when you made a powerful decision. It stops with me. You chose to respond differently, even when it felt uncomfortable. You walked away from what you used to tolerate. You stopped repeating conversations that led nowhere. You started setting standards instead of adjusting them. And yes, breaking cycles comes with a cost. It can feel lonely. It can make you seem different to people who are still comfortable in those patterns. Some may not understand your growth, others may resist it, but that's the price of evolution. You outgrow spaces that once felt familiar. What you did wasn't small. You disrupted a pattern that could have continued for years, maybe even generations. You chose healing over habit, growth over familiarity, awareness over repetition. And now, your life is shifting in a new direction. Because cycles don't break on their own. They break when someone becomes conscious enough and brave enough to choose differently, and that someone was you. You stopped chasing and started attracting. There was a time when you believed effort meant pursuit, that if you just tried harder, gave more, showed up more consistently, things would finally work out. So you chased. You chased validation, opportunities, relationships, recognition. You thought if you could just prove your worth enough, everything would fall into place. But all that chasing left you exhausted. Because deep down, you were running after things that weren't aligned. They were just available. And that realization changed everything. You began to understand that what is truly meant for you doesn't require constant pursuit. It requires alignment. It requires you becoming the version of yourself that naturally resonates with what you desire. So instead of running outward, you turned inward. You worked on your mindset, your energy, your standards. You became more intentional about what you allow, what you entertain, and what you invest your time in. You stopped forcing connections that felt one-sided. You stopped saying yes out of fear of missing out. You stopped trying to convince people to see your value, and in that stillness, something powerful happened. Things started coming to you, not because you were lucky, but because you were aligned. The right people began to recognize you without explanation. Opportunities appeared without you chasing them down. Situations flowed instead of forcing you to struggle for every inch. That's the difference between chasing and attracting. Chasing comes from a place of lack, like something is missing and you have to go find it. Attracting comes from a place of wholeness, like you already are what you seek, and now it's just finding its way to you. Now, you move with a different energy. You don't pursue, you position. You don't force, you allow. You don't beg, you receive. Because what's truly yours doesn't need to be chased. It recognizes you when you finally recognize yourself. You discovered your inner power. For a long time, you searched outside of yourself for answers. You looked for validation, direction, reassurance, hoping someone else would confirm what you felt deep down. You trusted other people's opinions over your own intuition. You doubted your instincts. You second-guessed your decisions. But life has a way of stripping away external noise, until all you're left with is yourself. And that's where everything changed. because in those quiet moments when there was no one to guide you, no one to lean on, you started to hear something you had ignored for so long: your own inner voice. At first, it was unfamiliar, subtle, easy to question. But the more you listened, the stronger it became. You began to realize that your intuition had always been right. Those feelings you brushed off, those instincts you silenced, they were guiding you all along. You just hadn't trusted them yet. And once that trust was built, your power awakened. You stopped asking for permission. You stopped waiting for confirmation. You moved with certainty, even when the path wasn't fully clear. Not because you knew everything, but because you finally trusted yourself enough to figure it out. That's real power. Not control over everything around you, but confidence within yourself regardless of what's happening outside. Now, you carry a different presence. You walk into rooms with quiet certainty. You make decisions without needing approval. You trust your timing, your path, your process. Because you've learned something most people never fully grasp. Everything you were searching for externally, clarity, strength, direction, was already within you. You just had to return to yourself to find it. And now that you have, you're unstoppable. You became aligned with wealth and love. There was a time when you associated love with confusion and effort with exhaustion. You thought love had to be proven through struggle, and wealth had to come through constant pressure. You normalized inconsistency. You tolerated emotional chaos. You believed that in order to receive more, you had to give more even when it was draining you. But that version of you no longer exists. Because somewhere along your journey, your standards shifted. You stopped calling confusion chemistry. You stopped calling bare minimum potential. You stopped accepting stress as the price of success. You realized that anything truly meant for you will not require you to abandon yourself to maintain it. And that realization changed your entire alignment. Now, you understand that real love feels like clarity. It feels safe, steady, and intentional. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't come with emotional roller coasters. It adds to your peace. It doesn't compete with it. And wealth, it no longer feels like something you have to chase endlessly. It becomes something you align with. Opportunities flow from your clarity. Abundance responds to your mindset. You begin to attract situations where your value is recognized and compensated without you having to prove yourself over and over again. This is the shift most people never reach, because it requires unlearning the belief that struggle equals worthiness. Now, you move differently. You don't entertain anything that disrupts your peace. You don't settle for connections that lack depth or consistency. You don't attach yourself to opportunities that come with chaos. Because you've stepped into a new frequency, one where love is mutual, one where wealth is natural, one where your life feels like it's flowing, not fighting. And the most powerful part, you didn't force this alignment, you became it. You are ready for your next chapter. There was a time when you questioned everything, your path, your purpose, even your progress. You wondered if you were doing enough, becoming enough, moving fast enough. It felt like you were in a constant state of becoming, but never quite arriving. But what you didn't realize then is what you can see now. You were already becoming the person who could handle what you once prayed for. Every lesson, every release, every moment of growth, it wasn't random. It was refining you, shaping your mindset, strengthening your boundaries, expanding your awareness. You weren't just going through life. You were being prepared to step into a completely different version of it. And now, you're here. Not perfect, but ready. Ready because you've done the inner work most people avoid. Ready because you've faced yourself honestly. Ready because you've learned how to stand alone without feeling empty. You're no longer looking for something to complete you. You've become whole within yourself. That's what makes this chapter different. You're not entering it from a place of lack, desperation, or uncertainty. You're stepping into it with clarity, intention, and self-trust. The decisions you make now will reflect who you've become, not who you used to be. And that changes everything. Because the next chapter isn't about repeating old patterns, it's about experiencing life at a higher level. Better connections, greater opportunities, deeper peace. A life that actually reflects your growth. The doors opening in front of you now, they're not random. They're the result of everything you've endured, learned, and released. So step forward without fear, because this time, you're not hoping it works. You know you're ready. This is your confirmation. Everything you went through was necessary. Every lesson, every ending, every moment you thought you were falling apart, you were actually being rebuilt. Not into who you used to be, but into who you were always meant to become. Chosen one, this is your shift. You're no longer in the season of confusion, pain, and constant questioning. You've graduated from that version of your life. The cycles have been broken. The lessons have been learned. And now, you're stepping into a reality that reflects your growth. A reality where peace is normal, where love feels right, where wealth flows without struggle. This is what happens when you do the inner work. Life starts to meet you at your level. So don't doubt it. Don't overthink it. Don't shrink back into who you used to be just because it feels unfamiliar. Growth will always feel new before it feels comfortable. Stand firm in who you've become. Because the same strength that carried you through your hardest moments is the same strength that will sustain you in your greatest ones. You didn't come this far to question your worth now. You came this far to finally live in it. And from this moment forward, everything you attract, everything you build, and everything you experience will reflect the powerful, aligned, and elevated version of you. This is your next level. Step into it.